Hello and welcome to the Street Crime UK YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. Feltham Young Offenders Institution, or more commonly known as HM Prison Feltham, is a prison for male juveniles and young offenders, occupying 45 acres of southwest of Feltham in London Borough of Hounslow. It's operated by Her Majesty's Prison Service. The original Feltham institution was built after 1857 and opened on the 1st of January 1859 as an industrial school, and was taken over in 1910 by the prison commissioners as their second borstal institution. The current institution was formed in 1991 as a result of a merger between Feltham Borstal and the Ashford Remand Centre. It's managed directly by Her Majesty's Prison Service, rather than management being contracted out to a private firm. Publicity of a pre-2005 wave of violence of the institution was coupled with alleged racism amongst certain officers. These reports took as case in point the murder of Zahid Mubarak by racist cellmate Robert Stewart on the day that Mr. Mubarak was due for release. Proposals made to distance Her Majesty's Prison Feltham from its reputation included a renaming, such as to HMP Bedfont Lakes, receiving scant support. An inspection by Her Majesty's Chief Inspector of Prisons was made in May 2005. The 2005 report highlighted the progress made and praised the effective reception induction procedures and the outreach team that deal with self-harm issues, and the measures in place to deal with race relation issues. Voluntary sector work takes place within Feltham, and its voluntary sector coordinator manages performance of more than 25 agencies for those convicted and placed on remand, or detained pending a trial. Another inspection was made in July 2013, which was critical of what was considered an excessive use of force by prison staff in some incidents, which had taken place in 2012, and an unacceptably high level of violence in the institution. On the 4th of September 2013, the Ministry of Justice announced that it was undertaking a feasibility study on replacing the existing buildings at Feltham with a new, larger adult prison and youth detention centre. A 2014 inspection of the prison found that the progress that had been made in some areas, but there were still some major concerns such as levels of violence remaining high, although with fewer incidents than previously, and prisoners having a lack of activities available and being kept locked up in cells for long periods. Among 3 ex-prisoners who came forward to the BBC in 2015, one reported seeing another having his head being stamped on. Feltham in 2015 was the most violent prison in England and Wales, having hosted 894 attacks or fights, so serious and demonstrable that proportionate prescribed legal punishments were imposed. Among these, inmates who have committed acts of violence may be kept in their own accommodation for 23 hours a day, seeing 1 free hour from solitary confinement. Officers knew of 48 gangs in 2015 among the teenagers, changing population of Feltham's interned. Young adults and juveniles occupy different residential units today. Units housing young adult offenders hold approximately 60 prisoners. Units housing juveniles hold 30 prisoners, and almost all the juvenile rooms are for single occupation. There is a mixture of double and single accommodation for young offenders, mostly double. All rooms have integral sanitation and TV, and all areas operate the IEP scheme, Incentives and Earned Privilege scheme. The prison's regime, including education, full and part-time education, workshops, vocational training in the construction industry, farms and garden works, and also NVQs. Various types of offending behaviour groups are also available. Other features include the use of voluntary agencies, one-to-one teaching, substance misuse work, and pre-release courses. An unannounced inspection of 2017 found that the juvenile units taken together were not safe for either staff or boys, and that the violence had increased in the section for older young men, prompting a Commons debate. A serious assault on a staff member took place during the inspection. The prison was criticised for the 23-hour detention, in that although exercise was possible, showers were not on those days, and sought to improve this. Healthcare was good, and mental health care listed as impressive. Efforts to resettle offenders back in the community after release were also good. In popular culture, there's the hard-fi track of Feltham is Singing Out, which refers to the prisoners. Grime artist JME refers to Feltham in his track Tottenham. There was a televised film called Scum in 1979, which typifies the violence of many such institutions before a key stage of national reform. Its broadcasting unwillingly was delayed to match that reform. The original Feltham was built in 1854 as an industrial school and was taken over in 1910 by the prison commissioners as their second borstal institution. The existing buildings opened as a remand centre in March 1988. The current HM Prison and Young Offender Institution Feltham was formed by the amalgamation of Ashford Remand Centre and Feltham Borstal in 1990. The establishment is split into Feltham A, which holds young people aged 15 to 18, and Feltham B, which holds young adults aged 18 to 21. Feltham A, there are 7 units for young people, each unit holds 30 people. Almost all the cells are single occupation. All cells have an integral sanitation and television unit. Alpine Enhanced Support Unit, Curlow, the Induction and Reverse Cohort Unit, Dunlin, the Normal Location, Eagle, the Normal Location Enhanced Privileges Unit, and Falcon, the Reintegration Unit. Lastly, there is Heron, Normal Location, J, Normal Location. Feltham B, there are 10 units for young adults, including Kingfisher as the first night and induction unit. All rooms have integral sanitation and TV as well. Kingfisher is the induction unit with 53 beds. Lapwing is closed. Mallard is a normal location with 55 beds. Nightingale is a normal location with 55 beds. Osprey is also closed. Partridge is a normal location housing 55. Quail, a normal location with 55 beds. Raven, a normal location with 55 beds. And Swallow, another normal location with 55 beds. Teal is a closed location, and Ibis is the segregation unit. The daily regime within the establishment includes full and part-time education courses, including A-level qualifications which are run in conjunction with A4E and CFBT, distance learning courses from the Open University, and from the National Extension College are supported. City and Guilds courses are also available and include painting and decorating, bricklaying and motor mechanics. There's also an open college network course in farms and gardens. There is a gym open to all inmates which runs activities like badminton, weight training and a climbing wall. The gym also teaches various PE courses and the Duke of Edinburgh Bronze Award. The A part of Feltham was given an inspection in February 2021 and the B part in July 2019. The full report can be read at the Ministry of Justice website. In their latest report, the inspectors said of Feltham A is an establishment in West London that holds children aged 15 to 18. It is jointly managed with an adjacent establishment, Feltham B, which holds young adults. At the time of our last full inspection of Feltham A in July 2019, outcomes for children had declined dramatically and we considered them to be poor, our lowest judgment. This decline was so acute that my predecessor invoked the urgent notification process for the first time in an establishment holding children. The COVID-19 pandemic emerged 8 months later, and managers had to implement restrictions to keep staff and children safe. At this visit, we found that these restrictions had been implemented appropriately, and despite a significant outbreak of COVID-19 among the staff, the establishment had experienced very few cases among the children itself. Since our last inspection, progress had been made, and remarkably in the middle of a pandemic. Children were split into groups of 4, in which they accessed education and other activities. We found that being in small groups had improved the quality of relationships between children and staff. Self-harm had reduced dramatically with only 5 incidents recorded in the previous 6 months, compared to 242 in the same period before our previous inspection. The number of violent incidents had also fallen, although 1 in 5 children felt unsafe at the time of our visit, and there was a concerning rise in multi-perpetrator assaults as friction between different groups increased. The Enhanced Support Unit had been relaunched and there was a positive ethos enabling children to spend more time out of their cell, including for education and interventions. Health services were generally good with very few waiting lists for clinics, and the dental service was particularly proactive and had established itself as an urgent care centre. This ensured that children could access treatment in the early stages of the pandemic. Time out of the cell had also improved since our last inspection. On average, children received about 4.5 hours a day during the week and 3.5 hours during the weekend. This included face-to-face education, which had been consistently delivered since June 2020. There were some areas where progress was not as good. Support for children to maintain contact with family and friends needed improvement to make sure that video and in-person visits were accessed by all children who wanted them. While the improvement made at Feltham A is commendable, some of this reflects how bad things have been in the time of the urgent notification. Headway has been made with a far smaller population than usual, and the challenge for our local and national leaders is to consolidate and build on this progress as the population increases. And in their report on Feltham B, they said that Feltham B holds convicted male prisoners aged between 18 and 20. It's situated adjacent and comes under the same management as Feltham A, which holds boys aged between 15 and 17. At the time of this inspection, the prison held around 360 prisoners. The prison was last inspected in January and February 2017, when we found that outcomes for prisoners in 3 of 4 of our healthy prison tests, safely, purposefully, actively and rehabilitation and release planning were not sufficiently good. Overall, the results of this inspection mark a significant achievement for an establishment that has faced similar pressures to many others that have not been able to maintain, let alone improve, their overall level of performance in recent times. Having expressed concerns elsewhere that Feltham had been left without a governor for some 5 months during 2018, I am reassured to be told that 2 parts of the establishment will in future each have their own dedicated deputy governor in an effort to ensure greater resilience and continuity. I hope that this will allow Feltham B to continue to make progress and avoid the risk of managerial focus being diverted to address the many problems we found during the inspection of Feltham A. The progress that has been made to date at Feltham B was credible and reflected in the fact that in the space of some 2 years it had managed to achieve or partially achieve around half of our recommendations from the last inspection. In terms of safety, there were distinct weaknesses in the strategic management of violence, the use of disciplinary procedures through the incentives and earned privileges scheme, and oversight of the use of force. However, the weaknesses were to some extent ameliorated by good relationships between staff and prisoners, and compared with other similar establishments, fewer prisoners felt unsafe at the time of the inspection, and fewer reported being victimised. A feature of the establishment that needed attention was the impact that security processes were having on the ability of prisoners to access education, training, work and healthcare. It was telling that our colleagues from Ofsted commented that across the prison, managers did not do enough to ensure that all aspects of the prison regime contributed to prisoners' good attendance and punctuality. Quite apart from whether prisoners were getting to the activities to which they had been allocated, there was also the issue that there were only sufficient full-time activity places for just over half the population. Meanwhile, some 20% of the entire population were employed as residential unit cleaners and painters, where they were underoccupied and poorly managed. We also found that when we conducted the roll checks, some 37% of prisoners were locked in their cells during the working day, which is far too high a figure for a training prison. Living conditions in the residential units had improved since the last inspection, but the condition of cells was no more than adequate. There was still too much graffiti and there was still a pressing need for refurbishment in some areas, particularly the showers. Although the quality of healthcare services was generally good, prisoners, as noted above, were all too often unable to get to their appointments because of regime restrictions or security measures. For instance, in June, prisoners failed to attend 58% of the appointments made with a doctor, around 35% with a dentist and 80% with the optician. This was clearly an unacceptable waste of NHS resources. It was pleasing to see that the well-led and well-organised Offender Management Unit had reduced the backlog of Offender Assessment System, or OASYS, initial assessment from 56% to 19% in the space of 6 months. Feltham B is a complex and challenging establishment, in which to achieve the outcomes that should be of real benefit to prisoners and public alike. It was reassuring that some real progress had been made since our last inspection. Clearly there was still much to do, but we were heartened by the positive attitude by many of the staff about what could be achieved, and the sound relationships between many staff and prisoners that underpinned much of the progress that they had already been made. Clearly there was still much to do, but we were heartened by the positive attitude of many of the staff about what could be achieved, and the sound relationships between many staff members and prisoners that underpinned much of the progress that had already been made. We have seen in the past that progress at this complex establishment has proved to be fragile. I hope that on this occasion it will prove possible to build on what has been achieved and sustain it into the future. Now we're going to look at a prison officer who sent sexual images to teenage inmates and smuggled in parcels who was recently jailed. A married prison officer who felt rejected by her husband sent sexual images of herself to 2 teenage boys at a young offender institution and smuggled parcels into the unit, a court heard. Mum of one, Jordan Traynor, who is 17 weeks pregnant with her second child, was jailed for 18 months after she admitted misconduct in a public office while working as a prison officer. Miss Traynor of Glen Eagles Drive, Normanton, developed a flirtatious relationship with an inmate after she became a prison officer at the Young Offenders Institute in June 2018. She was sentenced for these very serious offences. Prosecutor Jonathan Sharp said this progressed to her taking sexualised photographs of herself and particularly boldly printing copies of those photographs at her place of work before handing the copies to the boy. She also smuggled into the institution several parcels both for him and at the inmate's instigation other inmate. She was to say in an interview that the parcels were phone shaped, though she did not actually see their contents. The Crown's position is that she knew full well these were phones and that she admitted that she was aware she was committing an offence by bringing these items into the institution. Mr. Sharp said that Miss Traynor knew a second 17-year-old inmate had a mobile phone and started sending him sexualised text messages and sexualised photographs. Indeed, she was regularly asked colleagues to swap shifts so that she could be working where the inmate would be, and a message that she sent to him on the morning of December the 23rd, 2019, provides a clear indication of her feelings towards him. It read, "Can't wait to see you today, I miss your face, kiss." Mr. Sharp said that gossip was rife at the young offender institution, and searches of both boys' cells were carried out on December the 23rd, 2019. Each had a record of the defendant's personal mobile number, and the first inmate still had the 2 photographs. The second boy had 3 mobile phones which were seized and examined. Miss Traynor was stopped as she arrived for work and was suspended from duty. She was then sent the second boy a message which read, "I'll not see you again now, I've been suspended," and after receiving no reply, later she sent another message which read, "Full of conversation, aren't you?" Mr. Sharp said that it appears not to have occurred to her that his phone was by then in the hands of the authorities. Miss Traynor admitted what she had done was wrong when she was arrested and interviewed on January 25th, 2020. Mr. Sharp said, as to her motivation, she candidly admitted that in relation to the first inmate, she liked the attention. Mr. Sharp said that Miss Traynor told the police the first boy had blackmailed her into doing some of the things she had done. Jane Edwards, mitigating, said that Miss Traynor has a 3-year-old child and is 17 weeks pregnant with her second child. Miss Edwards said that Miss Traynor has the support of her family and friends in her previous role as a prison officer at Feltham Young Offenders Institution in London, before she and her husband moved to Yorkshire to support his career. The court heard that after the move, her husband went onto a 2-week training course away from home. Miss Edwards said that he barely spoke to her and he told her that he needed space. She said she only received a couple of text messages from him during that time. She felt that she had to rebuild her life. She was aged 24 with a child who was not 2 yet. She felt unsupported and rejected by her husband, the man she had moved to support. She felt rejected by other prison officers. She felt they mocked her London accent. She began drinking heavily, up to 12 cans of Stella a day, and would not have been unusual for her. Miss Edwards said that Miss Traynor has suffered with mental health since she was a teenager and had recently been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. Miss Edwards said that Miss Traynor did not know anyone in Yorkshire, adding that she felt that these 2 17-year-old prisoners were essentially her only 2 friends, the only people she had to talk to. She said that she doesn't understand how she let this happen. Miss Edwards said that as for the explicit photographs, she said she was just happy someone was paying her some interest. She foolishly provided him with some photographs, the 2 found in his cell. He asked her to bring in vodka and cigarettes and asked for more explicit photographs, but she refused. She was told her photos and phone would be passed to the governor if she didn't do what she was asked. She said messages were sent to her saying that she could go to prison for what she had done. She said that she was told to swap shifts, which she did, and was asked to pass notes, which she did. Miss Edwards said that Miss Traynor brought in 4 packages on one occasion and did not know what was in them. Miss Edwards said that Miss Traynor's marriage broke down after she was arrested. She has a new partner now, and he is much more supportive of her. He is the father of her unborn child. Judge Simon Phillips QC told Miss Traynor, "The court has heard you engaged in flirtatious behaviour with these inmates, which clearly you enjoyed. It's been said that on your behalf that these 2 inmates were the only 2 people you could turn to. I don't accept that. There was a hierarchy. There were colleagues who you could, if you had chosen to, turn to for support. You chose not to do that." Jailing Miss Traynor for 18 months, Judge Phillips said, "As a former prison officer, serving any sentence is a challenging and difficult prospect in terms of the reception you may receive from other inmates." After the sentencing hearing, Detective Sergeant Alice Coates of Leeds District Prison Crime Team said, "As a prison officer, and particularly as one working with young offenders, Miss Traynor would have been in no doubt that her actions were a very clear breach of her professional responsibilities as someone in a position of trust." Officers from Leeds District Prison Crime Team worked closely with staff at the Young Offenders Institute to ensure a full and thorough investigation was carried out, which has resulted in Miss Traynor being convicted and sentenced for these very serious offences. So what are your thoughts on Feltham Prison? Are there any stories we missed? Please let us know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, stay safe.
Hello, and welcome to the Street Crime UK YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. Today we look at one of the biggest prisons in the UK prison system. HMP Prison Berwyn is a £250 million Category C adult male prison in Wrexham, County Borough, which is in Wales. It is the largest operational prison in the UK, which opened on the 28th of February 2017 and is operated by Her Majesty's Prison Service. The jail's name was announced by the then Governor Russ Trent on the 17th of February 2016. The name Berwyn comes from elements of Middle Welsh, Bar, which means summit or peak, and Gwyn, which means white. A spokesperson for the National Offender Management Service said that the prison has been named after a Welsh mountain range. An original shortlist of 6 names was Bridgeway, Marcher, Craig Tan, D Vale, Whittlesham, and Y Berwyn. These names were suggested by local schools, communities, and historical societies. HMP Berwyn is the first publicly run super prison built in the UK, with a capacity when fully operational of nearly 2,200 inmates. The prisoners, who are referred to as men while in the prison, are housed in twin-bedded cells on landings with 44 rooms on each one. The rooms are equipped with basic phones on which the men can make calls to pre-approved numbers after they have been vetted by the prison authorities. Capacity is capped at 1,300 while staff recruitment continues. Capacity at the jail has been capped to 1,300 while staff recruitment continues. The prison was designed to house over 2,000 men and was supposed to be the cheapest Category C prison in the country, with a projected cost of £14,000 per inmate. However, when a report was made in 2019, it was noted that it was still incomplete and the cost of a prisoner was £36,000 per year. Staff at HMP Berwyn are expected to stick to a set of values. These values are: value each other and celebrate achievements, act with integrity and always speak the truth, look to the future with ambition and hope, uphold fairness and justice in all we do, embrace Welsh language and culture, and finally, to stick at it. There are 3 houses at HMP Berwyn: Alwyn, Bala and Ceiriog, each divided into 8 communities that can accommodate up to 88 general population residents. The communities are as follows: Alwyn C Uppers houses those with life sentences and intermediate sentences for public protection. Alwyn D Uppers houses enhanced life sentences. Bala B Lowers houses the healthy living. Bala C Lowers houses prisoners in the progressive unit. Bala D Lowers Gabaith is a resettlement unit. Bala B Uppers Mensai Manay is an assisted living unit. Bala C Uppers Sean Stockter is for veterans and first timers. Bala D Uppers is for improving family futures. Ceiriog A Lowers Snowdon is for mature residents. Ceiriog D Lowers is an induction and first night unit. Ogwen Care and Support segregation unit and houses up to 21 prisoners. In 2017, residents of the town Bala in Gwynedd were angered by the use of their town's name in one of the prison's houses, with a petition being started to get the name changed. The petition received over 400 signatures. The first governor, Russ Trent, who had also served as the project manager, was suspended on the 21st of August 2018 following unspecified allegations. Nick Leader assumed the role of governor in 2019. As of today, the number 1 governor is Danny Khan and has been at this post since October of 2018. The prison is run by Her Majesty's Prison Service as part of the Welsh region. HMP Berwyn was given an inspection in the early summer of 2019. The report went as follows. This report records our first inspection of HMP Berwyn, located near Wrexham in North Wales. Berwyn opened in 2017. It is the first prison to open under the management of public sector for several years and will be the largest prison in the country. Designated as a Category C training prison, The establishment held 1,273 prisoners at the time of the inspection. They were held in 3 residential units, which were in turn subdivided into a total of 8 communities. In time, the prison will be able to hold 2,106 prisoners, although we are told that currently the numbers are capped to allow for the build-up of staff, as well as additional activity for the prisoners. Opening a new prison is a big challenge, especially when that process is a subject quite rightly of significant public interest. The challenges can be practical, but they can also be cultural. The prison opened with very clear rehabilitative vision, and it has faced resistance at times. The leadership team are still working hard to find and maintain the right balance between rehabilitation and security, freedom and control, sanction and rewards. As this report will show, some mistakes have been made and we identify some important weaknesses, but we also acknowledge the great effort that has been made to give this prison a good start. The prison is generally ordered and settled, and when measured against the test of a healthy prison, we found Berwyn to be a reasonably respectful place. Against our other tests, there were much more to do. Despite HMP Berwyn being a Welsh prison, about 75% of those held were from England. Arrangement for the reception and induction of new arrivals were impressive, and the clear majority felt safe on their first night. Our survey, however, revealed that about 23% of prisoners felt unsafe at the time we asked them, a figure comparable with other training prisons. Prisoner-on-prisoner assaults were lower than expected, but in contrast, prisoner-on-staff assaults were higher. Both measures seemed to be on a downward trajectory. Some work was being done to reduce the violence. However, other than an interesting initiative on Glendure community aimed at supporting some challenging prisoners, the delivery often lacked drive and needed to be implemented more effectively. We found, for example, 25 self-isolating prisoners who were completely unsupported. Schemes and initiatives. Schemes to incentivize good behaviour were similarly ineffective. Good behaviour were also ineffective. Use of force was higher than in similar prisons, and incidences usually involved the full application of restraints. Oversight was satisfactory, and new strategies to minimise the need for force were being developed. The environment and quality of supervision in the segregation unit was generally good, but the regime was limited. Security arrangements were proportionate and supported by good policing. Drugs had been too readily available, but actions by the prison to reduce the drug supply seem to have had some impact, and the drug testing rate has reduced to 21.49%. This was, however, still too high, and the supply reduction initiatives require greater coordination and drive. There have been no self-inflicted deaths since the prison opened, and self-harm was comparatively very low, but arrangements to support and safeguard those who were vulnerable were not very good. Strategic leadership was weak. Case management of those in crisis needed improvement, and those at risk we spoke to did not feel very well cared for. Most staff at HMP Berwyn were inexperienced, but those we observed were doing their best to contribute to a relaxed and positive atmosphere. Many prisoners felt frustrated by staff inconsistencies and uncertainty. We also observed some poor behaviour going unchallenged. The prison had, however, recognised their need to support the staff, with their attention being focused on the basics of prisoner management. Formal consultations with the prisoners, prisoner applications and formal complaints were delivered with similar inconsistency. Were all very positive. The prison has been successful in its aim to make such a large prison feel small. There was a real sense of community in most wings, and staff teams and prisoners spoke of their community rather than a wing. The promotion of diversity and equality in contrast was poor, although healthcare provision was good overall. Employed prisoners had a reasonable amount of time out of their cell, but it was much worse for those without employment, who had about 2.5 hours per day. During spot checks, we found that 28% of prisoners locked up during the working day, which, for a new training prison, was very disappointing. Routines were rarely curtailed, but often delayed, and not all staff and prisoners fully understood the requirements of the daily schedule or regime. One of the greatest challenges facing the prison was the lack of activity places. It is difficult to understand how and why the procedure of work and training places for a new prison could be so delayed. Facing a rising population and too few activity places, prison managers have created a range of activities, and there was sufficient places for the current population, but some were inadequate in quality and lacked challenge. Even those that were available were not fully used. Many prisoners were unemployed or failed to attend, and staff did little to support a sound work ethic. In contrast, those attending education or vocational training generally received excellent teaching, made useful progress and achieved very well. Our partners in Eston assessed provision to be good or excellent in 4 of their measures, and adequate and requiring improvement in just leadership and management. The prison was struggling to develop its approach to offender management and resettlement. The makeup of the population was not as had been originally envisioned. There had been no assessment of the current need. Many prisoners were serving long sentences, presented a high risk of harm, and too many prisoners did not have an up-to-date assessment of risk, which is known as OASIS. Offender management caseloads were too high, and case management was inconsistent and reactive. Public protection measures were similarly weak, and the prison lacked sufficient offending behaviour interventions to meet the need of the population. Work to resettle prisoners was better, but about half of those being currently released. At the time of the inspection, resettlement support for these prisoners was due to end in April, which was a concern. In this inspection, we met many managers and staff who were working hard to make a success of this new prison. Senior managers described themselves as being on a journey, and we saw lots of work, many policies and numerous plans. What was needed was better oversight, better coordination and sustained delivery. The staff seemed to us to be a strength of the prison, but they needed to support in delivering the basics of consistency. We thought the prison had made a good start. We were impressed by the energy and optimism we observed, and there was clearly a potential to move on rapidly. We hope that our encouragement to focus on the basics and the few recommendations we make will assist in that progress, and we hope to guide HMP Berwyn to becoming an enduringly safe and rehabilitative prison. What are your opinions on HMP Berwyn? Do you believe that a jail which is based in Wales will be able to rehabilitate its 75% population which is returning to England? Have you or anyone you know been to HMP Berwyn? What was your opinions of the place? Please let us know in the comments below. Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this content, please don't forget to like and share, and if you're new to the channel but you enjoy Street Crime UK content, please don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button so you can join us on the next video. Thank you for joining us today, and until next time, stay safe.
welcome to the Street Crime UK YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. Today we look at HM Prison Chelmsford. Her Majesty's Prison Chelmsford is a Category B men's prison and young offenders institution located in Chelmsford, Essex. The prison is operated by Her Majesty's Prison Service. Chelmsford began as a county jail in 1825 before transforming into a Category B prison, a young person's prison and a local prison. 1825, the newly completed Springfield prison, where some 43 individuals fell victim of the executioner's rope in the years up to the end of 1914. The prison's main entrance was originally through an austere stone-built Pofter's Lodge in the middle of the Springfield Road frontage. The lodge's flat roof was designed to support the gallows, scaffold and drop, while the forecourt could easily accommodate the hundreds and sometimes thousands of spectators that would congregate for an execution. The first private execution at Springfield was that of Michael Campbell. The 28-year-old Berwick-born tailor and former soldier was convicted of murder of Samuel Galloway, a retired dock worker in Stratford. In 1999, the management at Chelmsford Prison was severely criticised by the Chief Inspector of Prisons after finding that staff were failing to respond to cell alarms 5 years after a prisoner was beaten to death by his cellmate. The prison was also criticised for unacceptably bad conditions of uncleanliness. A thorough inspection a year later confirmed these failings at the prison. In 2002, conditions at Chelmsford were condemned as poor and cramped by the Goals Board of Visitors. However, in 2005, Chelmsford was praised in its inspection for improving standards and procedures for inmates at the prison. On the 25th of December 2007, 18-year-old Abdullah Hagar Idris hanged himself in the prison after he was told that he was going to be deported. In January 2013, the Ministry of Justice announced that the older parts of Chelmsford Prison will close, with a reduction of 132 places. In December 2015, a riot led to 6 members of staff needing hospital treatment. Education at the prison is contracted to Milton Keynes College, and courses offered include literacy, numeracy, information technology, art, barbering, journalism, cookery, ESOL, as well as social life and programs. The prison's gym also offers physical education with industry-related qualifications, as well as recreational gym. In addition, the prison has links to and facilities provided by organisations such as the Job Centre and the Samaritans. There is also a prison visitor centre operated by the Ormiston Children and Families Trust. Staffing at the prison has been reduced by 25%. According to the Independent Monitoring Board, bullying, violence and self-harm have increased markedly at the prison due to staff shortages. Budget cuts and the inability of the prison service to recruit and retain staff led to fears for the prison's safety. The prison is becoming more dangerous and less effective. Prison healthcare provided by Care UK is considered poor. There were delays in getting medication and reliance on agency staff to fill vacancies. There is insufficient secure mental health accommodation outside the prison for the most vulnerable inmates. The Independent Monitoring Board stated that the level of service being provided to care for prisoners' physical and mental health needs remains inadequate. Due to staff shortages, the staff were unable to provide engagement work or education for prisoners. Illegal drugs are a problem. Use of force by staff is increasing, and there is insufficient monitoring if this use is appropriate. Following the death of a vulnerable inmate in January 2017 and criticism from the prison ombudsman, Care UK announced it would end its healthcare contract there, as the level of the resource the prison service made available was insufficient. Drug use is a serious problem at Chelmsford, according to HM Inspectorate of Prisons. 42.6% of prisoners failed drug tests, and organised gangs supplied prohibited items. Inspectors describe significant concerns about safety and excessive levels of violence. Much of the violence is due to supply and the use of prohibited substances. Peter Clark said that the rising violence, suicides, and accessibility of drugs and bad living conditions made him consider using the urgent notification protocol, which would make the Justice Secretary take action. In 1 month, prison authorities seized £15,000 worth of illegal goods. There were 17 suicides at Chelmsford during the 8 years to 2018, and 5 of them were since the inspection in 2016. Deborah Coles of Inquest said the prison was incredibly unsafe due to the rate of suicides, and said that it suggested the plethora of recommendations following previous self-inflicted deaths have not been implemented. Recent inquests into deaths at Chelmsford Prison have highlighted failures around the management of self-harm procedures, a lack of staff training in mental health awareness, inadequate risk assessments and failures in responding to bullying. The failure to implement existing guidelines on the care of those at risk indicates a lack of care, neglect and inhumane treatment from punitive and often inflexible prison regimes. Problems inspectors drew attention to included that 40% of prisoners who did not take part in activities were locked up in their cells for 22 hours a day, and items including mattresses and pillows were in short supply. The Howard League for Penal Reform maintained that Chelmsford was designed to hold 521 men, but the prison actually held 700 men when it was inspected. Dean Saunders, 25, killed himself at Chelmsford in January 2016. An inquest jury found that Saunders was downgraded from continuous watch to half-hour checks for financial reasons, and neglect contributed to his death. Care UK, a private company running healthcare at Chelmsford, treated financial consideration as a significant reason to reduce the level of observations, although they were warned repeatedly about Dean's mental condition. Dean's mother pleaded with staff to keep him under constant watch. The jury stated that Mr. Saunders and his family were let down by serious failings by mental health services and the prison system, and that the assessing his mental health needs was not adequately conducted, with multiple failings in recording and passing on information. Dean's family stated that hospital, not prison, is where Dean deserved to be and needed to be. We as a family, together with our lawyers and inquest, want Dean's death to mark the end of empty promises and the start of change. The prison ombudsman also found significant risk factors were ignored when observation of Dean Saunders was cut back. He found those trying to care for Dean felt that he should be in a mental health facility rather than prison. He added that I am also concerned that there appears to have been some confusion at Chelmsford about the process for transferring mentally ill prisoners to hospital, which meant that an opportunity to transfer Mr. Saunders in December of 2015 was missed. Sadly, the criminal justice system did too little to protect this very vulnerable man. Dean's father, Mark Saunders, said, "There was no proper medical structure there. We were lied to and misled all the way through. We were devastated." In 1990, former professional footballer Tony Adams spent 57 days of a 4-month sentence in HMP Chelmsford for drink driving. The 1979 film Porridge, a film version of the Porridge TV series, was filmed almost entirely on location at Chelmsford Prison. The punk rock band The Sex Pistols recorded a live album at the Chelmsford Prison called Live at the Chelmsford Top Security Prison. Chelmsford was built in the 1830s as a county jail close to the centre of Chelmsford. 2 new residential units were opened in 1996, E and F wings, to relieve overcrowding, and a 3rd unit, G wing, was opened in 2006. It serves courts in Essex, taking men whose homes are mainly in the Essex area. It holds those who are sentenced on remand or on trial, and it holds adults, some young adults, and also foreign national prisoners. The oldest part of the establishment houses 4 wings, A, B, C and D wing, off a central hub with E, F and G being opened more recently. A wing includes the segregation unit. B wing is an induction and general population unit. C wing and D wing are also general population units. E wing is the integrated drug treatment unit. F wing is general population, and G wing is housing for vulnerable and enhanced prisoners. The newer part of the prison has a 12-bed, 24-hour healthcare unit. The prison has a Samaritan support listener scheme in place for prisoners who are in distress or who need to talk in confidence. Specialist organisations are based within the prison, forming part of the reducing reoffending agenda to actively engage prisoners with all elements of resettlement. These include Narco, CTEC, the Job Centre Plus, Ormiston, Children's and Families Trust, and Inside Out. Assistance is available on a wide range of issues: money and debt guidance, help to open a bank account, drug and alcohol interventions, multi-agency resettlement and pre-release clinics, job clubs, and developing ties with prisoners and their children through storytime learning and children's visits initiatives. Partnerships are also held with external companies helping to drive education and employment opportunities in preparation for release. The Safer Custody Helpline is an answer machine service that can be used by prisoners or their families to report bullying or to report concerns about self-harm or suicide or any other safer custody issue. Healthcare is provided by the NHS via North Essex Partnership NHS Foundation Trust in a purpose-built facility within the prison, in the newer part of the prison. It has a 12-bed, 24-hour healthcare unit. The prison inspectors have made a follow-up IRP to Chelmsford after their inspection in May 2018. In the summary of their report, they said, "At our inspection of HMP Chelmsford in May to June 2018, we made the following judgment about outcomes for our prisoners. The safety was poor and not sufficiently good in 2016. Rehabilitation and release planning was reasonably good and previously was sufficiently good. HMP Chelmsford is a medium-sized local prison holding prisoners on remand and sentence. It had an operational capacity of over 700, but at the time of this review visit, the population had been reduced by about 60 to enable the refurbishment of some wings. However, this reduction was a temporary measure, and we were told that HMPPS would increase the population in the very near future. As the prison was overcrowded, even with the reduced population, we had major concerns about the return to the unacceptable overcrowding we saw last year, and the inevitable impact of this, particularly on the safety and decency of everyone. The last full inspection was carried out in June 2018, and we had key concerns in many areas of our healthy prison tests, which had persisted and even deteriorated in some areas since the previous inspection in 2016. We gave our lowest possible judgment on safety because of several major concerns. For example, the level of violence was very high and some was serious. There was a lack of insight into the causes of violence and little action taken to reduce it, despite a desire by staff to make improvements. Illicit drugs and other banned items were easy to obtain, and the mandatory drug testing MDT rate was one of the highest recorded in England and Wales. Prisoners at risk of self-harm were not managed well enough, and there had been a high number of self-inflicted deaths, 16 in the previous 8 years. The living conditions for prisoners were mixed, and there were unacceptable standards of cleanliness and lack of access to some very basic items. Healthcare leadership needed improving, and some important areas of the provision needed urgent attention. Purposeful activity also received our lowest judgment. The lack of time out of cell, with many prisoners spending up to 22 hours a day locked up, was a major concern. The number of deaths in custody through suicide and the suspected use of illicit drugs remained worrying, but there had been reasonable progress in improving the quality of care for prisoners in crisis or at risk of self-harm. However, the prison needed to keep recommendations from the Prisons and Probation Ombudsman, or PPO, under constant review to ensure that the progress was sustained. Major investment in refurbishments on some of the older wings had delivered much needed improvement to the conditions of many showers, toilets and cells. Prisoners now had better access to basic items, such as bedding and pillows, although the prison needed to do more to sustain this advance. The prison had dealt with most of the litter and rubbish we had seen previously in the external communal areas and cell window grills. There had also been reasonable progress in the provision of healthcare. The new provider commenced just 2 weeks before this review, and it had already begun to address many of our concerns. However, it was inexcusable that Her Majesty's Prison Service had still not equipped the prison with a more up-to-date drug detection equipment. Chelmsford needed to make further reductions in the supply of drugs, a priority to safeguard prisoners' health and well-being, as well as making the prison safer by reducing violence and deaths. Consultations with prisoners had improved but needed to be more widely publicised across the prison. Some prisoners remained frustrated at their inability to gain answers to simple requests or queries. Time out of cell, although more predictable across the prison, remained very limited, particularly in the evening and at the weekends and for those not involved in purposeful activity. Despite the Governor's aspiration to provide at least 1 hour a day for outdoor exercise, most prisoners still only had 30 minutes, which was not enough. In rehabilitation and release planning, I had concerns about the delivery of the Community Rehabilitation Company contract and some key weakness in offender management arrangements. The CRC provision through the crime reduction charity shown reasonable progress with clear signs of further advances underway. There had been little development in increasing offender supervision contract with some prisoners, and the interdepartmental risk management team was not well defined and did not provide the oversight needed for high-risk prisoners being released into the community. Last year I clearly noted my confidence in the prison's capacity for change and improvement, and this was well founded. The Governor continued to set a clear vision for the prison and had retained the support of those around her. We have identified good or reasonable progress in 4 key areas, and this report makes clear what needs to be done to make advances in the remaining weak areas. The prison was inspected in August 2021, and in their report the inspectors said that Chelmsford is a Category B local prison and resettlement prison for adult and young adult men. At the time of the inspection, 712 prisoners were held in a sprawling institution, comprising older wings from the Victorian era and more modern facilities added from the late 1990s. Following this inspection, I wrote to the Secretary of State on 26 of August 2021, invoking the Urgent Notification Protocol. I set out in detail my concerns about the prison and the judgments that had caused our concerns of action. Under the protocol, the Secretary of State commits to respond publicly to the UN within 28 days, explaining how outcomes for those detained will be improved. The Secretary of State's response, for which I am grateful, is also detailed further resources for the report. We had last inspected Chelmsford Prison in June 2018 and reported our serious concerns about the conditions we found. At that time, we assessed outcomes in safety and purposeful activity as poor, our lowest assessment, and in respect, not sufficiently good. Only in rehabilitation and release planning did we judge outcomes to be reasonably good. Despite this, the then Chief Inspector was reassured by both local management and the HM prison system and probation service that they were aware of the problems at the prison and would implement strategies for improvement. Sadly, that optimism was misplaced. At this inspection, we found no improvement in outcomes in safety and purposeful activity, both of which remained poor, no improvement in respect, where outcomes remain not sufficiently good, and a deterioration in rehabilitation and release planning to not sufficiently good. In reaching these judgments, I took full account of the additional pressures placed on the prison due to COVID-19, but also the failure of the Special Measures Programme and the initiatives introduced by Her Majesty's Prison Service to drive the improvement. These had not worked. As at our last inspection in 2018, a new governor had been appointed a few months before we arrived. We were encouraged by his vision and enthusiasm for the establishment, but we were also struck by the seeming intractability of the failings at Chelmsford. The last time we were able to write a positive report about this prison was 10 years ago, and it was clear to us that the jail was failing in its basic duty to keep those it held safe. This report also highlights our concern about the negative and damaging staff culture. Many staff were new or inexperienced, their morale was low, and they were disengaged from their work and dismissive of the men in their care. Prisoners found it very difficult to access even the most basic entitlements, and were frustrated that they could not get things done. We were told that this frustration had led to an increase in assaults on staff. The negative culture among some staff was compounded by a lack of management oversight or accountability, which allowed poor staff behaviour and practice to go unchallenged. The paucity of the daily regime meant that many prisoners spent extended periods locked up and isolated in their cells. It was no surprise that many prisoners told us they felt unsafe at the prison. Such factors, combined with the inherent risk and vulnerabilities associated with Chelmsford's status as a frontline local establishment, and the failure to grip prisons' problems over the recent years, meant that Chelmsford met our criteria for an urgent notification. I concluded my letter to the Secretary of State by saying that HMP Chelmsford would not improve without a sustained drive to make sure that all staff members take responsibility for creating a safer, more decent environment, a meaningful regime, and greater engagement with training and education. I argued that this will require strong and consistent leadership at all levels within the prison and much more effective support from Her Majesty's Prison Service. As we indicated in 2018 and repeat now, the drift and decline at this prison must be addressed. In accordance with the protocol between HM Chief Inspector of Prisons and the Ministry of Justice, or MOJ, I am writing to you to invoke the urgent notification process in respect of HMP and YOI Chelmsford. An unannounced inspection of the prison between the 9th and the 20th of August 2021 identified numerous significant concerns about the treatment and conditions for prisoners. This is the most recent in a series of concerning inspections over the last 7 years, and these findings were particularly disappointing bearing in mind the observations my predecessor made in 2018. At that time, the then Chief Inspector decided against instigating the UN protocol, having been persuaded that the prison had already begun to show signs of improvement under a new governor, with the support of Her Majesty's Prison Service. This latest inspection showed that these improvements have not materialised. As required by the process, I will set out in this letter the key evidence underpinning my decision to invoke the UN protocol. In addition, I attach a summary note with the main judgments from this inspection drawn from a similar document provided to the Governor at the end of the inspection last week. The Governor, the Prison Group Director, and Ministry of Justice officials have been informed of my intention to invoke the UN process. I shall, as usual, publish a full inspection report in due course. The decision to invoke the UN process is determined by my judgment, informed by relevant factors during the inspection that, as set out in the protocol between HM Chief Inspector and the MOJ, may include poor healthy prison test assessments. Inspection methodology is outlined in the HM Prison Test Inspection Framework. The pattern of the healthy prison test judgments, repeated poor assessments, the type of prison and the risk presented, the vulnerability of those detained, the failure to achieve recommendations, and the Inspectorate's confidence in the prison's capability and capacity for change and improvement. The protocol sets out that this letter will be placed in the public domain and that the Secretary of State commits to respond publicly to the concerns raised within 28 calendar days. The response will explain how outcomes for the prisoners in this institution will be improved in both the immediate and long term. The then Chief Inspector was reassured by both local management and Her Majesty's Prison Service that they were slighted on the problems at the prison and a strategy was in place. Leadership at both local and regional level readily acknowledges the gravity of the issues facing the jail, and Her Majesty's Prison Service has already placed the prison in special measures. I therefore concluded that on this occasion I had sufficient confidence in the ability of the prison to improve that I would not invoke the urgent notification protocol. At the latest inspection in August 2021, we found that the optimism had been expressed 3 years ago was misplaced. Chelmsford, like nearly all other prisons, had been hit hard by the virus, but the failings that we have identified are deep set. In addition, we were told at the 2018 inspection that Her Majesty's Prison Probation Service had in place a special measures plan of intervention for Chelmsford. This programme had, however, proven to be largely ineffective in improving outcomes. The chronic and apparently intractable failings at Chelmsford have now been evident for at least a decade, with our inspection in 2011 being the last time we felt able to report positively on the prison. It has sadly failed in its responsibility to keep prisoners safe. We have now assessed outcomes in safety as poor for 2 consecutive inspections and not sufficiently good for the 2 inspections prior to that. The prison's record in providing purposeful activity, including training and education that may equip prisoners to lead productive lives on release, is equally poor, and the prison's performance in ensuring a measure of respectful treatment is still not good enough. Even rehabilitation and release planning, a former strength, has deteriorated. Of 9 main recommendations we made 3 years ago, none has fully been achieved. These factors, combined with the inherent risks and vulnerabilities associated with Chelmsford's status as a frontline local establishment, mean the prison meets all our criteria for an urgent notification. Some of the key findings from this report revealed a dominant staff culture that is negative and damaging, and has led to the failure to promote safety, decency, or rehabilitation among prisoners. Although a few staff members we spoke to were committed and constructive, many others described very low morale, disillusionment, or disengagement. Although a few staff members we spoke to were committed and constructive, many others described very low morale, disillusionment, and disengagement. Staff members often failed to respond to even basic requests from prisoners, and too many were dismissive and showed only limited empathy and care for those whom they were responsible. Prisoners experienced real frustration in getting anything done, with leaders suggesting to us that the rise in assaults on staff was a direct result of these issues. Almost half of the prisoners in our survey said that they had been victimised by staff, particularly those with disabilities and mental health problems. Nearly a third of staff had under 2 years' experience, but they had yet to receive adequate mentoring or support. Prisoners were not sure when they would be unlocked, as the core day was not published. Often, first night cells approved for occupation by managers were by the 26th of August 2021. Emergency cell bells were often only answered after long delays. Despite our recommendations and the subsequent intervention of the Prisons and Probation Ombudsman, outcomes had deteriorated. 8 self-inflicted deaths and 4 non-natural deaths had occurred since our last inspection. This is also the 4th consecutive prison inspection where we have reported increases in the rate of self-harm. We found many weaknesses in the assessment. Care in custody and teamwork, or ACCT, and other preventative processes, failing in the night safety procedures, and a lackluster approach to the use of data and action planning. Over a quarter of prisoners said that they felt unsafe at the time of this inspection, and more than half had felt unsafe at some point during their stay at Chelmsford. Analysis of data was poor, preventing a deeper understanding of risks, so it was not surprising that plans to tackle violence and improve outcomes were limited or non-existent. The lack of accountability we referred to earlier manifested itself in an over-reliance on the small safer custody team, whose work was given insufficient priority, and in failure of other staff members and senior leaders to take responsibility. At this inspection, we found many prisoners locked in their cell for almost 23 hours a day. This reflected the COVID-19 restrictions, but even in 2018, many prisoners were locked in their cell for 22 hours a day. Some restoration of education had recently begun, providing some additional activity, but a third of these places were unused. Plans to reintroduce a meaningful regime were limited and being implemented far too slowly. Chelmsford is a violent, unsafe prison, in which conditions for prisoners have declined disturbingly over recent years, despite attempts by Her Majesty's Prison and Probation Service to support improvement. Many failings stem from a negative and demoralised staff culture, which results in little apparent concern for or attention to the welfare and basic needs of a complex and at times vulnerable population. Hello and welcome to the Street Crime UK YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. Today we're taking a look at Her Majesty's Prison and Young Offenders Institution, Forest Bank. Forest Bank is a Category B men's private prison in the Agecroft area of Pendlebury in Salford near Manchester, England. The prison is operated by Sodexo Justice Services. Forest Bank Prison was constructed on the site of the former Agecroft Power Station. The 25-year design, construct, manage and finance or DCMF contract was won by KLAX, formerly UKDS, in 1997, and it opened in January 2000. In November 2002, a report from Her Majesty's Chief Inspector of Prisons praised Forest Bank for its staff-prisoner relations, management structure, increased staffing levels and levels of association between inmates. However, the report also noted that many of the prison staff at Forest Bank lacked experience, and there was insufficient purposeful activity with fewer than half of the prisoners engaged in meaningful work or education. In 2004, it emerged that a prison officer at Forest Bank had been caught trying to sell heroin to inmates. The officer was caught with 147 wraps of the drug hidden inside his shoes when he started his shift. The officer was jailed for the offence. In March 2005, an inmate escaped from Forest Bank whilst being taken to hospital in a taxi. The prisoner was handcuffed to two prison officers as they travelled from the prison to the nearby Hope Hospital, when the taxi was stopped by two men who threatened the guards with a gun, forcing them to let the inmate free. In December of the same year, the prison was severely criticised by the Chief Inspector of Prisons for high levels of violence and drug taking amongst inmates. The inspection found that in 1 month alone, more than 2 kilograms of cannabis, 60 grams of heroin, and 4.6 grams of cocaine were found at Forest Bank, and 40% of the compulsory drug tests were positive. The report also found a significant deterioration in safety for staff and inmates at the prison with routine intimidation of staff, prisoner assault on other prisoners running at 25 a month, and staff turnover of 25% a year. There had also been 2,500 prisoner discipline hearings in 6 months. In February 2006, another inmate escaped from Forest Bank whilst visiting hospital. The prisoner managed to escape from 2 prison guards and fled from the Manchester Royal Infirmary wearing only a surgical gown. In May 2010, another inmate, Michael O'Donnell, escaped from Forest Bank. The inmate cut off a section of his own ear in order to regain release from the facility in an ambulance. The ambulance was then stopped on Agecroft Road, or A6044, by a gang of armed men who released Mr. O'Donnell and made off. Mr. O'Donnell was recaptured on the 28th of May 2010. He was sentenced to 9.5 years on the 29th of May 2010 and was sent to Her Majesty's Prison Strangeways. He was found hanged in his cell on Wednesday the 23rd of June 2010. In November 2010, Her Majesty's Chief Inspector of Prisons, Nick Hardwick, noted in his report on the prison that some young inmates had been tied up in their bed linen and beaten by other prisoners. The report also acknowledged that in other matters there were many signs of improvements. On the 10th of February 2011, former Forest Bank prison nurse Leanne Cartledge, 23, was sentenced to 4 months in prison for taking a mobile phone into the prison to give to Michael O'Donnell, with whom she was in a relationship, and which he used to help his escape. In 2011, it emerged that 3 former members of staff at Forest Bank successfully sued Calix for unfair dismissal and their treatment by the serving Deputy Director of the prison. Also in 2011, Calix changed their name for the second time, becoming known as Sodexo Justice Services. A 2013 report from the Chief Inspector of Prisons noted that there was a need for more work, education and training to be made available, with over 40% of prisoners locked up doing nothing during the working day. Since the inspection in 2010, there had been some deterioration in the quality of activity and learning and skills provided. Her Majesty's Prison Forest Bank is a Category B local prison, although the majority of the inmates are Category C. The term local means that this prison holds more people on remand to the local courts as well as sentenced prisoners. Adult inmates at Forest Bank come from the courts at Wigan, Leigh, Bolton and Bury. Young offenders come from courts at Manchester, Oldham, Stockport, Trafford, Tameside, Rochdale and High Peak. The prison is divided into 8 wings, A to H, a healthcare unit and a care separation unit. Accommodation at the prison consists mostly of single cells with some double cells. All the cells are designed to be safer, having almost no ligature points due to the fact that modularisation was being used in the method of construction. Activities in the prison include production workshops, training workshops and vocational training courses in motor mechanics, industrial cleaning, catering and welding. There is a visits hall at Forest Bank with facilities including a WRVS-run canteen. On the 29th of January 2017, a prisoner was found dead in his cell after a suspected drug overdose. The inmate is believed to have taken the potent synthetic drug Spice before becoming ill. The prison opened in 2000 under a 25-year Private Finance Initiative, or PFI, contract to provide 800 places as a Category B local prison. Spaces gradually increased to 1,160 before a 264-place extension was opened in November 2009. Following a reduction in prisoner places, the establishment now holds 1,364 remand and sentenced adult males, and remanded young adults 18 to 21-year-old. Wings A to F are the original prison, and G to H are the new building added in 2009. The wings hold the following: A1 young adults, A2, B1, B2 and C1 are general, C2, D1 and D2 are vulnerable prisoners, E1 is the first night induction wing, and E2, F1 and F2 are general. G1 is a recovery wing, G2 is resettlement, H1 is a first night ISMS unit, H2 is ISMS motivational unit, healthcare and inpatients, it's only 19 beds. In healthcare, the prison has a 20-bed inpatient facility incorporating 2 4-bed wards and a 2-bed observation suite. The GP service is provided by Cimarron, a GP agency, and the healthcare team are employed by Sodexo with a 70-30 split between the general and psychiatric nurses. There is also a substance misuse, a range of services offered to support and assist prisoners with substance misuse issues. Education at the prison is unsurprisingly run by Sodexo. There are over 200 jobs available at the workshops and 180 education places. Courses offered in education focus on the basic education such as numeracy and literacy. It is possible to acquire nationally recognised qualifications in food preparation and cooking, RIPH Foundation Food Hygiene, and a BICS British Institute of Cleaning Service, HACCP Foundation Certificate, Skills for Life, and Competency in Silver Service Techniques. The prison was given an inspection in May 2019, and the full report can be read at the Ministry of Justice website. In the latest report, inspectors said that Forest Bank is a Category B local prison in Salford, with an operational capacity of 1,460. Soon to be designated a reception prison, Forest Bank's main function is to serve the local courts and receive newly remanded or newly convicted prisoners from the community. As such, the prison holds the full range and type of prisoners with all the risks and challenges it implies. Opening in 2000, the prison is relatively modern and has for the last 19 years been managed by the private operator Sodexo. Forest Bank was the last inspected in 2016 when we found a well-led, competent and confident prison that was ensuring reasonably good or better outcomes against all 4 of our healthy prison tests. Reception and induction arrangements were adequate and functional, although undermined by some tardy processes. Technology that had been acquired to improve security on reception was underused, and the whole early days experience was something of a missed opportunity, which would have been benefited from more management attention and grit. A third of prisoners told us they felt unsafe, a situation which was even worse among vulnerable prisoners, where there was a finding of 52%. Violence had more than doubled since our last inspection in 2016, and much of it was serious. Structures were also in place to analyse and combat the problem, and there were interventions to confront perpetrators, but actions were not always followed up to a conclusion, and low-level antisocial behaviour was not addressed sufficiently. There needed to be greater focus on coordination to address violence, by, for example, incentivising good behaviour and consistently holding to account those who behave poorly. Use of force was more prevalent, and at a level now comparable with similar prisons. Incidents were properly recorded in documentation, although oversight was lacklustre and limited use was made of body-worn camera footage. Use of segregation had also risen, and it was now too comparable to similar prisons. Cellular accommodation in the segregation unit required improvement, as did the very basic regime and reintegration arrangements. Security generally was applied proportionately, and we identified the management and use of intelligence as a strength of the establishment. Close working relationships with local police and robust staff anti-corruption arrangements were also in place. Many prisoners suggested to us that access to drugs was comparatively easy, although while still too high, positive mandatory drug tests of about 15% was lower than at most similar prisons. Self-harm had increased significantly since we last inspected, and was much higher than we expected to see. There had also sadly been one self-inflicted death. The prison had access to good data concerning the problem of self-harm, and recommendations made by the Prison and Probation Ombudsman, who investigated the death, were being implemented. Relationships between staff and prisoners were respectful and polite. However, we were concerned that staff, many of whom were very inexperienced, did not assert sufficient authority when supervising prisoners, with the danger that some prison groups were able to take advantage. Most prisoners were positive about most aspects of daily life at Forest Bank. For example, the food and good access to the shop and accommodation was generally clean and bright. However, 60% of cells were doubled up and therefore overcrowded, and much furniture and cell equipment was damaged or missing. We also saw some cells with broken windows, and there was some evidence of delays in responding to cell call bells. Diversity and equality was promoted reasonably well through a comprehensive action plan and helpful consultation, including innovative one-to-one surgeries for prisoners with protected characteristics. Health services had improved since the last inspection, although more improvements were still needed to make the inpatient facility a fully therapeutic environment. Time out of cell was better than we often see, and the daily routine, including access to evening association, was reliable, although nearly half the population was locked up during the working day. There were sufficient places in work and education for all, and attendance, if not punctuality, were good. We were not confident, however, that allocation to some wing roles was always equitable or fair. Our colleagues in Ofsted judged that the overall effectiveness of education, skills and work as good, a not insignificant achievement in a local prison. Assessment or OA-SYS systems and sentence management were reasonably good, and public protection arrangements robust, with the prison's whole approach to resettlement supported by a strong community link. Support for family ties and engagement was similarly very positive. Forest Bank continued to be a reasonably well-ordered and settled prison, delivering a generally good outcome. Prisoners could, for example, access a better regime than we normally see for this type of prison. Rehabilitation and resettlement work was consistently a strength. Overall, this is an encouraging report, although we do identify more work to do in safety and providing support to staff. We left the prison with a number of recommendations which we hope will assist in the process of improvement. Now, we're going to look at two arrested amid police investigations into a prison throwover at Manchester. Parcels launched over prison walls often contained drugs, mobile phones and knives, detectives say. Police have seized 2 parcels filled with suspected contraband and arrested 2 men aged 33 and 19 on suspicion of conspiracy to convey articles into prison. Dawn raids were carried out at 2 addresses in Salford on Friday, according to Greater Manchester Police, with specialist sniffer dogs deployed in subsequent searches. Officers said the warrants they used related to an operation carried out by the force's new Challenger prison team as part of a wider investigation into links between organised crime groups and the 4 prisons within Greater Manchester: Forest Bank, Buckley Hall, Hindley and Manchester. Detectives said that they believed the parcels were ready to be thrown over the walls at Forest Bank in Agecroft, Salford. GMP also offers that on Thursday night, coordinated searches were carried out inside Forest Bank by prison officers, leading to a number of mobile phones being seized, which the force said initial intelligence suggested were linked to an ongoing investigation. Today's activity has resulted in 2 arrests and a number of significant seizures, which will be forensically examined as part of this investigation, Detective Inspector Jack Murphy said. The new Challenger prison team are dedicated to relentlessly pursuing any individuals involved in these throwovers, both inside and outside the Greater Manchester prison system. He added that the parcels often contain drugs, mobile phones, steroids, tobacco, paper soaked in spice, cannabis and even knives, and sometimes that these items are sold for 5 times their standard price inside of prisons, and that they can make the prison very unsafe. It can promote gang culture and can lead to further crimes being committed by inmates, while also posing a serious risk to the safety of prison staff and prisoners, and lining the pockets of organised crime groups, D.I. Murphy said. David Smart, the Deputy Director at Forest Bank, said that organised crime has a negative effect on the safety and security of the staff and residents at Forest Bank, and we are proud of our partnership with the Challenger prison team in making our prison and community we serve a safer place to be. Now we're going to look at two prison officers who were attacked by a gang of masked men armed with baseball bats after finishing work at a prison in Salford, Manchester. One officer was hit on the arm and another managed to jump out of the way as the gang crashed a car through a barrier and attempted to mow them down. The men also smashed windows of the visitor centre at HMP Forest Bank in Agecroft before fleeing. The incident happened recently, but only now the details have emerged. The prison understands that one line of inquiry is that the attack may have been revenge for an inmate being moved out of the prison after allegedly assaulting a female prison officer who was knocked out. A spokesperson for HMP Forest Bank said that an incident occurred outside Forest Bank on Tuesday the 20th of July where two prison officers were attacked by masked men. A member of staff did sustain an injury from the attack and the incident has been referred to the Greater Manchester Police. In a statement, Greater Manchester Police said, "Police were called shortly after 8 PM on Tuesday the 20th of July 2021 to reports of a disturbance at HMP Forest Bank. Inquiries have established that 3 people arrived at the prison in a dark-coloured car before alighting the vehicle and attacking a staff member with a baseball bat. The offenders then attempted to run over a second member of staff using the car before driving through the barrier and causing extensive damage to the visitor's entrance. The member of staff who was attacked with the baseball bat was taken to hospital with an arm injury. He has since been discharged. No arrests have been made and inquiries remain ongoing." So what are your thoughts on Her Majesty's Prison and Young Offenders Institution Forest Bank? Are there any stories we missed? Please let us know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, stay safe.